Welcome, everyone. My name is Annette Johns, and I'm the Associate Director of Policy and Practice with the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Social Workers. I have the honor of being the moderator for today's education event titled Aboriginal Social Work, Committing to Anti-Oppressive Practice. This is certainly a very timely and important topic as we reflect on our cultural competence as social workers. This webinar is a collaboration between the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Social Workers and the Canadian Association of Social Workers. It is exciting to note that we have hundreds of social workers from across Canada tuning in this afternoon and this morning. Before I introduce our presenter, I want to go over a few housekeeping details. The webinar presentation will be approximately 60 minutes, followed by a 30-minute question and answer period that I will moderate. Please note that the recording of this webinar, the PowerPoint, the reference list, and the standards for cultural competence in social work practice that were produced by the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Social Workers in 2016 will be available on CASW's YouTube channel and their website tomorrow under the Continuing Education tab. The webinar will also be uploaded to the website of the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Social Workers under Continuing Education. During the presentation, I encourage you to type in your questions at any time, and I will begin asking them at the end of the presentation. Note that only the presentation team can see your questions and they're not public. A certificate of attendance will be available at the end of the presentation as well. Simply click on the yellow rightmost icon at the bottom of this presentation window when the presentation is wrapping up, and you can download your certificate. So without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker for our session today. Angel Compton-Osmond is a registered social worker in Newfoundland and Labrador. She completed her Bachelor of Social Work and her Master of Social Work at Memorial University of Newfoundland. Angel has practiced as a social worker in isolated Dene and Inuvialuit Northwest Territories communities and Cree reserves in northern British Columbia. Angel's grandfather was of Mi'kmaq descent from western Newfoundland, and her interest in Aboriginal social work practice and work is dedicated to him. Angel is also a member of our Promotion of the Profession Committee and is committed to promoting social work practice in this province. It is a pleasure to work with Angel, and I'm thrilled that she is facilitating this event today. So without further ado, I will now pass things over to Angel to begin the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Annette. So this is Angel Osmond speaking now. I just wanted to say good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I guess my greeting really depends on where you're located because I think we're spread out from coast to coast here today. I just wanted to say that I'm really humbled to have the opportunity to share with you, fellow colleagues from right across Canada. I know we have folks here from Newfoundland, Labrador, and all the way over to British Columbia and north to our territory. So I'm really excited about that, and I really hope you're having a great day so far. So I really want people to feel free to sit back and relax. This presentation was sort of intended to be, a relaxing environment where ideally we would be able to sit around in a large circle together, share food, friendship, and ideas in kind of a genuine Aboriginal community style. But, of course, we're not able to do that today. We have the webinar set up, which is my very first time kind of going through slides and speaking into thin air. So please bear with me. This is certainly not what I'm used to, but we'll give it a shot anyway. I'll move through the slides at a steady pace. Questions will be accepted at the end or privately by email, and I believe Annette has mentioned that. You'll notice here that my slides are content heavy. This was done intentionally when it was created, and that's so that participants and our social work students and colleagues could keep the materials for future use and not struggle to take notes during this session. So I really want you to be able to just sit back and enjoy the show, I guess. Most of everything that I would want to say will be found directly on the slides, so you'll be able to keep them for future reference. You'll also find that my reference list is attached at the bottom of your screen, and I encourage you to keep a copy and to use the resources for your future studies. So currently I'm a social worker in Newfoundland and Labrador with the Supreme Court. I created this information session as part of my master's work, guided by the mentorship of Dr. Shelley Burney-Lefkovich, who may or may not be on the call, I'm not sure. And he's from Memorial University School of Social Work, so that's where I completed my master's. In 2015, I ran this session for community members of Delaunay Northwest Territories in the Health Center, and they provided valuable feedback for changes and improvements. So I'm constantly seeking feedback from Aboriginal community members, elders, and colleagues so that we're able to change and grow this session. So looking at why this seminar was created, so if we take a look at the purpose and need, it was originally created for social work students and practitioners who would be interested in Aboriginal community practice. It's for social workers currently practicing in Aboriginal communities. It's to fill gaps in social work education. I don't know about you, but I remember in my BSW studies there was very limited focus on Aboriginal learning and Aboriginal incorporation of curriculum in our BSW programs, especially over here in Newfoundland. So we had identified that as a need. I know there are many universities in other provinces where there's much more focus, and that's fantastic, and we need to see that spread right across our country. So I surveyed some BSW students, and they indicated the need for more education in areas of Aboriginal people and history, knowledge and skill development for future practice, social work theories and perspectives, exploration of social issues experienced in Aboriginal communities today, and building competence and confidence in our practice. So we'll take a look at the history of Canada's Aboriginal peoples, social work's place in history, and some issues and considerations for Aboriginal communities today. Much of this information is probably not new to you, but there may be some information here that may be new, so we'll just move through and see what we can learn. Canada's first people were hunters and gatherers who lived in self-governed cultural and familial groups. They consisted of the Northwest Coastal people, the Plateau people, Plains, Eastern Woodland hunters, Eastern Woodland farmers, the Subarctic, the Inuit, and covered all areas of Canada, right across the board. They lived with very little illness, without destroying the land, took great care of the land, very little pollution, and took very great care of this land that we all now call home. European contact and occupancy began in the 1600s when the trading of fur and goods was established, and soon after, conflict, wars, and disease began to destroy the first peoples. Many were killed, and some cultural groups were completely lost. When I present this in Newfoundland, Labrador, I always ask what cultural group was completely lost in our province, and we all know here as Newfoundland and Labradorians that we lost the Beothuk many years ago. Pre-Confederation treaties began in 1701. They were created to promise peaceful relations, but despite good intentions, conflicts continued. The Beothuk were annihilated by 1829. And the last survivor was Shauna Didith, and she died of tuberculosis. We know that the first people today, we know them as Inuit, Métis, First Nations, and those of mixed ancestry, and who are comprised of many cultural groups. Taking a look now at the Indian Residential School Canada's attempted genocide. So it's important for us as social workers to get a sense of the history. I know we certainly discuss a lot about residential school in our practice in Aboriginal cultures because we see a lot of long-term effects. So it's important for us as practitioners to have a fairly good understanding of the history as much as we can to better understand the issues that we face today in working with other people. Newcomers to Canada deemed Aboriginal people uncivilized and in need of fixing. Believing that they were acting with good intention, Canadian government developed a plan to eliminate Aboriginal cultures. They supported and funded the creation of Indian residential schools where children will be placed to purify them of their indigenous ways and Christianize them. For over 100 years, beginning in the 1870s, Aboriginal children were removed from homes and communities by government officials, including police and social workers. Parents were threatened with incarceration if they did not give up their children willingly. Children were beaten for speaking to siblings, speaking their language, showing emotion, and asking for their parents. Some children died at school and were buried in unmarked graves where their parents were never notified. Some parents found out that their children were deceased because they never returned home. And you'll see a photograph there if you take a close look. I know the writing is quite small, but it's Thomas Moore, Saskatchewan, 1874. Some of my photos are taken from archives and placed into the slides, but most of the photography is my own. And I would like to just give you a moment to read this slide by yourself on your own, in your own mind. So this was a letter written by a young boy by the name of Edward from Onion Lake Residential School in 1923, who had written a letter home to his family back home. So just by reading that, it kind of gives you a sense of some of the experiences that were had in residential school. Food historian Ian Masby revealed that in the 40s and 50s, over 1,300 Aboriginal children were used as test subjects to examine malnutrition and the effectiveness of taking vitamin supplements. So I'm guessing they were looking at the illness of scurvy and so on. This involved allowing children to become ill by withholding food and medical care, and then giving vitamins to compare the results. Children suffered a loss of culture, language, identity, familial attachments, and were subjected to physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And we know from reading the records and listening to the stories of our friends and family of some of the experiences that many of them had. Children were denied love and affection, and Aboriginal parents were denied the right to raise their own children. The last school closed in 1996. I know sometimes people are really surprised that the last school actually closed in 1996, and I was too when I first started my research. I had thought that perhaps the schools had closed maybe in the early 80s, but I didn't realize the last one had closed in 1996. Not really that long ago. So finishing up our conversation about the residential school history, which is really only a drop in the bucket in terms of the residential school experience and the stories of many people across Canada. But like I was saying, it's important for us to take a look at it and to encourage one another and to challenge ourselves to study more and to learn more. And when I piloted this presentation in the community of Delaney Northwest Territories, I remember my colleagues feeling really sad during these slides, and rightfully so, bringing back lots of memories and stories of their loved ones and so on. And they were really in a rush to get through these slides. And, you know, I kind of wondered if maybe I should have left them all out, but I had one particular friend who said to me, no, keep these things there. Keep these there so that our colleagues and that people across Canada can see some of the examples and some of the truth of what happened so many years ago. Here's a photo of the roundup and shipment of children to residential school. So as you can see clearly there that they had to leave behind their family members, their parents, some of their siblings, and go on to attend school in other communities, leaving behind people they knew, people they loved, as well as their culture of origin. So social work in most areas of Canada played a role, unfortunately. And of course, with that, we leave a scar on history. Social workers were involved in the apprehension and transporting of children to residential school in many places. Many practitioners today are met with community members' fear, distrust, anger, and hurt. And this continues to influence the ability to form relationships of trust with families, especially when some social workers represent the government. And especially if we go into communities and into families and into homes and into lives with tasked the duty to perform authoritative duties, such as removing children, for example, from unsafe situations. So if there was already fear, distrust, and anger present, it is very difficult to gain trust in such a short amount of time. Some of the issues that we face in Aboriginal communities today, and I'll just mention that this picture actually was taken in Delaney, Northwest Territories. So that was the last Northwest Territories community that I worked in before returning to my home province. Beautiful community, as you can see there. Some of the social issues that are experienced across Canada today include alcohol and drug addiction, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, family violence, lack of familial attachments, elder and child abuse and neglect, suicide and self-harm, loss of culture and identity, poverty and food insecurity, some gambling addiction, mental health issues, lack of resources, and painful memories and multi-generational trauma associated with the residential school experience. There's also continued intentional and unintentional racism, oppression, and assimilation happening in all Aboriginal communities. Among these issues that we face in Aboriginal communities today, there are, of course, many remaining beautiful aspects and wonderful, healthy aspects in communities that we need as practitioners to look for and build upon with the help of our colleagues and community members. One of the other issues that I think I may add to this slide is probably the mention here of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So for sure, that's definitely an issue that we really need to support the focus, support in making sure that we advocate for better resources and more research and answers when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women in the current inquiry. So while I lived in BC, I had the opportunity of working with an Aboriginal educator out there by listening to some of his teachings, David Rattray, and some of you may know who that is. And in one of his sessions in particular, he mentioned that it will take us approximately 9 generations to move toward helping Indigenous families heal from trauma related to the residential school experience. A study sponsored by the Native Women's Association of the Northwest Territories found that 8 out of 10 girls under the age of 8 were victims of sexual abuse, and 5 out of 10 boys were also sexually abused in Aboriginal communities up north. Scholars trace the high rate of abuse to the legacy left behind a residential school. So here's where it's important for us to ask each other the question, if grandparents and parents were raised in residential school, which exposed them to authoritative violence, lack of human attachment, repeated abuse, what have they learned about parenting future generations? So it's very difficult for parents and grandparents to, know the ways in which children can be helped through some of these generational traumas when they themselves have been victims. And this photograph is a picture of a little friend of mine who caught a fish and decided to share it with us. That would have been at Midway Lake in the Northwest Territories. So in regards to restitution and the federal apology, on Wednesday, June the 11th, 2008 at 3 p.m., the Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, made a statement of apology to former students of Indian residential schools on behalf of the Canadian government. And the link is there if you would like to take some time when you get a chance to go in there and have a good read at the the letter of apology, the statement of apology that Prime Minister Stephen Harper made. And it's also important for us to consider what is the Aboriginal criteria for making restitution and apology, and do they match? Can you see some similarities in the statement of apology in comparison to what Aboriginal criteria for restitution and apology would be? And it says here, Elder Alfred said, restitution is purification. It is a ritual of disclosure and confession in which there is acknowledgement and acceptance of one's harmful actions and a genuine demonstration of sorrow and regret, constituted in reality by putting forward a promise to never again do harm and by redirecting one's actions to benefit the one who has been wronged. So I encourage you all to take some time to look at the apology and then go back to read what the criteria is for restitution. So now we move into the second segment, and we're going to look at, I guess, some considerations for developing trust in Aboriginal communities as social work practitioners. I'm sure we have all discussed in the past what cultural competency means to us and how our own cultures and our own life experience and learning has contributed to how we achieve or not achieve or understand or not understand what cultural competency might be. And the question that I like to ask here is, can we ever be truly competent? And, you know, it's important for us to constantly examine and re-examine what cultural competence means to us as practitioners and professionals in the community. And it is important to recognize that claiming to be knowledgeable in a culture other than our own can enable unintentional oppression. So it's important to always be very cautious when we're working in other cultures and other communities, that we have good self-awareness in regards to our own culture and the culture in which we are working. True cultural competence is practicing respectfully, as an ally, and as a learner. And those three key considerations are basically the foundation of this presentation. So first we'll take a look at respect. And respect can have many meanings. And if we were all sitting together right now in person, I would sort of slow things down and I would look at each of you and I would say, let's have a discussion. What does respect mean to you personally? Some of the key considerations that I've added here for respect include learning as you go, asking questions and asking permission, being open about who you are personally and professionally. And believe me, working in Aboriginal communities, you may get a lot of questions about who you are personally and who you are professionally and what your intention is. It's important to get to know elders and community leaders, standing up against racism and oppression. That doesn't mean just on a professional level, but also on a personal level. There are many opportunities where you may hear a racist comment or an oppressive comment, or notice something in service delivery that is racist or oppressive, and it's very important for us as social workers to respond to that ethically and to be able to shut down racism and oppression whenever we experience that. That also can mean advocating for improved services or more culturally improved services. It's important to show respect when attending community activities and events, being friendly. And usually when I have a real live audience, I get a few giggles because being friendly is kind of common sense. But I definitely felt like I needed to put that in there because it's just one of those things that is really appreciated in communities where people don't know who you are. By simply being friendly and giving the time of day to somebody and validating them as a person, whether professionally or personally, if you're standing in a store and you see a client and they smile at you, it's okay to smile back. It's okay to say hello and to continue on your way. But being friendly is truly a gift that goes a long way. Accepting what is offered. So in an Aboriginal community, typically if you are offered a special gift or food or a cup of tea in a client's home, then they're showing respect to you, and it is important to show respect back by accepting. So that may include tokens of appreciation, food, participation in events, and so on. Some little friends there in the photograph from Palatuf, Northwest Territories. And there's my daughter in the blue dress and the little white hat sitting off to the side with her new friends. So, keeping openness in the toolkit. It's important to introduce yourself to community leaders and organizations when you arrive in an Aboriginal community. So, taking the time to visit the band office or the community leadership office or whatever that may be called. Visiting the health center, fellow colleagues, you may need them at some point, and they most certainly will need you as well. So it's important to build those relationships as quickly as possible. The school, the store, and the other social work or helping professional colleagues that you may have there in direct contact with. So part of being open is making sure that we are clear about our role in the community, what our intentions are there. We may be there to provide mental health and addiction services. We may be there to assist with funeral preparation or burial. We may be there for child protection duties. Whatever the role is that you have in the community, it is very important to be clear and open about what that is. How long will you be there? Sometimes you may hear, that there's high turnover rate in some communities, which can be a concern for community members. And in regards to the delivery of services and the quality of services, sometimes turnover rate really affects that. So lots of times you may be asked how long you will be there for. Honesty with clients is very important. You may be asked all kinds of questions. Why did you choose social work as a career? Who are you and where are you from? Why are you involved with my family? How will you help my family? What will happen if a child is at risk in my community? So another thing that I thought was important to include is allowing extended family members to be involved if requested and if appropriate and safe to do so. Extended family members in many cultures are very involved in the lives of children and in the community, and many of them may also be elders in the community as well. Responding respectfully when approached in public about work. And I put there in brackets that this is a common interview question because when I interviewed for social work positions in the Northwest Territories, they would ask me scenario type questions such as, what will you do if you are approached in the grocery store and asked by a client what the status of their file is? So I guess that really highlights the fact that you not only work in a community, and especially smaller, isolated communities, you not only work there, but you live there. And you share the same services, and you share the same stores and activities and so on. So it's not uncommon to be pulled aside at a feast or a dance to be asked if you're dropping in tomorrow for a visit. And so how will we as professionals, but also as carers and helping professionals who actually care about our clients, how are we going to respond to that? And what would be most appropriate here to preserve privacy and confidentiality, but also validate the client and show them that we care and we're listening. So just something to consider. Want to be able to debunk the homogeneity myth. This is one thing where I really make sure that I talk in detail about, I guess, because it's very important. Not all Aboriginal cultures are the same. Languages, stories, beliefs, healing practices, and traditional ceremonies vary across Canada, even those close in geographical proximity. For example, the Innu and the Inuit of Labrador live close together, geographical proximity, but their cultures are quite different. Your clients may not know what the medicine wheel is, what smudging is, or anything about sweat lodge ceremonies. It is not okay for us to assume that all of our Aboriginal clients know what these things are and wish to participate. It's important for us to ask them. Social work education and textbooks typically include a chapter or two on Aboriginal theory and approaches, and this is where you're going to see the medicine wheel. And hopefully there's a few of you out there nodding along with me. But so basically, yeah, in a lot of social work curriculum, you'll find that the sections on the Aboriginal approach and so on incorporates the use of the medicine wheel and that sort of thing. And it's important for us as professionals and practitioners to remember that, look, the Inuit of Labrador, is not culturally appropriate or known for them to include the medicine wheel in their healing practices. But it may be more appropriate for the Plains Cree or other cultural groups across Western Canada. So it's important for us to make sure that we don't make those assumptions. And it's also important to incorporate into practice with caution for that very reason. So we want to ask clients about the cultural beliefs that they would like incorporated into their work with you, just exactly as I said, so that we can make sure that we're not kind of buying into the homogeneity myth that all Aboriginal people participate in smudging or participate in sweat lodge ceremonies when that may not be the case at all. So do not assume that Aboriginal clients self-identify as Aboriginal either. Some have no knowledge of their culture of origin, and some have rejected an Indigenous identity for any number of reasons. It could be trauma, it could be lack of opportunity and experience in their own culture. So it's important for us as practitioners to just make sure that we have those conversations with people. And it is okay to ask the questions directly to people. How would they like their culture incorporated into our work? And teach me a little bit about that, and what does that look like for you, and what's important to you? I am a learner. So working in Aboriginal communities really requires us to participate and practice as a learner if it's in a culture that is not our own culture. So asking questions instead of guessing, finding and developing a trusting relationship with a community elder or leader. Community elders and leaders expect to be consulted with. We need to find out what are the community standards, and that is specifically important for child protection work. That a little more later on. What religious or spiritual beliefs are important to the community? How does the community organize funerals and grieve deaths? And what might your role be there as a social worker? You may need to help order caskets and supplies for funerals. It may be that the community closes their services and stores for a period of time. And it's important for us to acknowledge and respect that those things happen in different ways in different communities. What do they expect from you and the agency that you represent? What are the cultural norms in the community? For example, the use of humor and teasing. And I hope I'm getting some smiles out there. So that's very common. If you are being teased in the community you're working with and you start to feel offended, please don't feel offended, because if you're being teased, you are being accepted in a lot of communities. Entering a home without knocking. So one of the first times I did a home visit in the Northwest Territories, I stood outside the door and I knocked and I knocked and I knocked. And I knew people were inside because I could hear them. And a young man came by on a snowmobile, and he stopped, and he yelled out to me. He said, "Hey, miss, don't knock. You just go in. You're in the north now." So, I reluctantly, having grown up in Newfoundland, Labrador, where we knocked on people's doors and we waited for people to open the door and invite us in, I reluctantly turned the knob and walked into the home and walked into the living room and asked for the person I was looking for. And that was totally normal, totally acceptable in that community. And so from then on, I learned to kind of use a hybrid greeting. So I would knock 3 times and then walk straight into the home. And that's totally acceptable. But if I knocked, they knew it was the social worker because I couldn't bring myself to not knock. That's my own cultural influence that I felt like I needed to do that. So I did, and it was okay. Accepting tea. So you may be on a home visit, and you may be offered food. You may be offered a cup of tea. And it is respectful and polite in many, many cultures to accept what is given to you. Avoiding eye contact may be common in some Aboriginal cultures. Not all. I would say not all. I definitely know that this is a cultural feature for some of the folks in Labrador. But I have worked in other Aboriginal communities where I have not noticed this to be a cultural norm. So I guess it's all about learning, and that's why it's important for us to remain learners. Seasonal activities. So that's another one. In one of the Inuvialuit communities in the Northwest Territories, in the springtime or when it was time to harvest whale, most of the community would leave, including the children, even if school was in session. So, lots of times you might be the only social worker in the community, and you might get a phone call from a teacher, and the teacher will say, most of my students are gone. They're not attending school. Can you check on them? And my response would be, well, May, so, or whatever month. And everyone's gone. Everyone's gone hunting, and that includes the children. And we accept that that's traditional learning, and that is education in and of itself. Those are cultural norms that may not be normal for some of the visiting professionals, such as the teachers and the nurses and so on. But I think they soon kind of get accustomed to the reality of that the annual calendar is a little bit different than, where they may be from. Community leaders and elders are experts. And this is a common understanding across all Aboriginal cultures. As social workers, as social work practitioners in communities, we are not the expert. Instead, we may consult, advise, advocate, and assist people, and, of course, perform authoritative duties respectfully and with openness, as we've already discussed. I am an ally. So the photograph that I have inserted here is actually second Northwest Territories community that I lived and worked in, and that place is Paulatuk, Northwest Territories. And it's above the tree line. So as you can see there's no trees. And it was quite a windy but wonderfully beautiful experience, I must say. So looking at the consideration of I am an ally as a social work practitioner, spending time with clients to develop trust. So that might entail home visits, office visits, and community events that are spent together, attending community gatherings and exhibiting a willingness to learn and socialize together, rejecting racism at all levels, seeing beyond individual and community issues to the roots of the pain that we see as symptoms. And some of those roots of pain may be that people might be victims of abuse, that there are painful memories of residential school. In many, many communities, there's some loss of culture and in some communities there's a total loss of culture or very close to total. Experiences of trauma, loss of attachment, mental health issues, intergenerational addictions, unhealthy coping choices, losses of loved ones to suicide is another symptom of the pain in some communities. So it's important for us to ensure that we're advocating for resources and culturally appropriate services, advocate for communities, families, individuals, and children, advocate against systems, policies, and procedures that oppress. It may even be the very government agency that we're working for. It may be the education system that we work closely with, and it may also be the justice and the court system that doesn't incorporate cultural values in decision-making. So it's important for us as practitioners to ensure that we advocate for those considerations. And it is the collection of small actions that we do as practitioners on a day-to-day basis that are the stepping stones towards the positive changes that we want to see. Now let's take a look at respectful involvement in the community versus appropriation. Respectful involvement in the community, that entails attending community meetings, activities, and cultural events as a learner, as we've discussed, volunteering to help out, participating when asked, taking a non-expert approach, and accepting what is offered, gifts, knowledge, and participation in ceremonies. Cultural appropriation is the adoption of cultural elements taken from minority cultures by members of the dominant culture, and then using these elements outside of their original cultural context. So this cultural property may be forms of dress or personal adornment, music, art, religion, language, knowledge, social behavior, and used outside of its cultural origin and traditional context. And I put some of the examples there, such as dressing as an Aboriginal person for Halloween, adorning your body with tribal tattoos with no knowledge or appreciation of the meaning or origin. It would be very important to know these things, to have a sense of meaning or origin. Or even participating in, as an example, smudging without an invitation or prior learning by the cultural group, and specifically an elder. So, and I know I have listened to many elders speak over the years, and they will say that the misuse of sacred ceremonies, so for an example, that would be participating in smudging without prior learning about what that means, because it's a very powerful thing to do, can be dangerous to your spirit or dangerous to the culture itself. So it's important to make sure that if we are invited to participate, that we do that openly, willingly, if we wish to, and making sure that we put in the effort to learn about what it is we're going to participate in. Misuse of sacred ceremonies and consumerism or exploitation of Aboriginal traditions are dangerous. They're also oppressive and disrespectful. It's important to remember those key considerations. Now we move into the anti-oppressive practice considerations. And I think we are nearing the last portion of the presentation. The Aboriginal Approach. A true and anti-oppressive Aboriginal approach to social work practice is one that reflects the community's beliefs, values, needs, and wishes as is determined by them. What works for one Aboriginal community or family may not work for another. And we would have already learned that when we looked at debunking the homogeneity myth. Respectful and anti-oppressive practice starts by simply asking, can you help me learn about your culture and your traditional beliefs? How would you like to incorporate your cultural practices and beliefs into our work together? And let's agree to be open and honest with one another at all times. If you'd like to do things, and I'm missing some of my words there, it looks like the formatting has sort of changed a little bit. But basically, the question would be to clients, if you would like to do things, in a cultural way, or something doesn't feel right, then we need to talk about that. And it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to be open and honest about those things, that the things we incorporate into practice need to be beneficial and culturally appropriate for our clients. Research and community ownership. So I remember lots of times working in Indigenous communities where there would be researchers who would come, they would stay, spend some time in the community, and they might be looking at, some anthropology type students, people who are interested in the cultures, interested in the communities, who would like to write a paper or an article and so on. So these researchers would be participants in the community by staying there, asking questions, asking to interview elders and so on, and it's quite common. But I think we need to be mindful of the fact that considerations for anti-oppressive research initiatives in the Aboriginal communities that we work in need to be community-led. They need to be community-owned. The purpose and findings must benefit the community members. The community may request traditional use of information gathering, so that may be storytelling or a qualitative design rather than quantitative. Elders and leaders should be involved from the very beginning to the very end. And, the information needs to be by them, comes from them, is owned by them, benefits them, and is stored by them. Confidential information and results are stored how the community wishes, and this is respectful research and community ownership. Respecting community norms and standards. Whenever I do this presentation, I have a little conversation with people about the photograph that you can see there. So this is 3 young men. They're harvesting a whale in Paulatuck, Northwest Territories. And this is very common, and this amount of meat would feed a lot of people and their families. But when my husband and I were taking this picture, they had said to us, please don't put this photo across social media. And their reason for that was because they didn't want to be judged on what they were doing, on their cultural activity in providing meat for their friends and family. And so I strategically used this photo here to challenge you in a way that you have a look at this, and it might not be pleasant for you to look at, but it is very common and very much a part of the existence of the people in that community and very important to them traditionally and culturally. So it's our reaction to these type of experiences that really speak to who we are as professionals in Aboriginal communities. So when we look at respecting community norms and standards, such as exactly what you see here in the photograph, we want to look at what is typical in one community, need to consider that may not be typical in another, so reflecting the cultural norms of that particular community. It's important to get to know the people and their way of life. Some examples in some communities might include children being cared for by other family members for extended periods of time. I know that this can be quite challenging for child protection social workers, but it may very well be a cultural standard or a norm in a community. And the community raises the child. This is kind of a saying that I know we've all heard that throughout the years, that sometimes there are communities where the cultural norm is where the community raises the child. Children playing outside at 3 a.m., so 24-hour sunshine. In the far north, you're going to find that there are some kids who are out really late or some teens who are walking around really late, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's light out all night long. Custom adoption may be a norm in the community you're working in. funeral procedures, and communal periods of grieving. So sometimes stores or services may be closed for a prolonged time or for a full day or an afternoon or whatever, and that really just reflects a way that the community shows respect for the deceased and their family members. Parents withholding children from school to go out on the land or go hunting, so we've already touched on that a little bit. So these are some of the norms and standards that us as practitioners really need to, as learners and as allies, and respectfully get to know and ask questions about and come to an understanding of what is normal and common from one community to the next. Interdisciplinary work and our role in advocacy. So when we work in Aboriginal communities, we are also working with other helping professionals, and lots of times we really rely on them for support, and they rely on us, and we really need, for the benefit of the community, to work together in a way that is anti-oppressive and anti-Eurocentric, I guess, if you will. The agencies and governments that we represent are typically Eurocentric, so in policies, procedures, the demand for evidence-based practice, reflecting power and balance relationships, and lots of times are authoritative government entities. So it's important for us that we as social workers uncover injustices and promote change that reflects community well-being. In child protection work, community values may not reflect government policies. We are often the liaison between community and our agency, and it's important to advocate for change to better improve the services there for families and children. It's important for us to ask communities and families, what can we do together to keep children safe, to keep children in their communities, rather than sending them out to other communities, and worse than that, to communities where their own culture of origin does not exist. And how do we maintain attachments to families of origin? Very, very important when we are working with families in a protection capacity. School systems are based on westernized curriculum and tend to reject traditional knowledge or lack of incorporation of cultural knowledge. Now, this is not this is not static right across the board, because there are certainly many Aboriginal schools and communities that really do incorporate a lot of traditional learning for their children, and that is wonderful, of course. But, of course, there are many schools across Canada where traditional knowledge and incorporation of cultural knowledge there's not a lot of focus there. The school year does not reflect seasonal activities, and we need to help support communities in educating their children traditionally and support parents in educating their children traditionally. That best reflects their culture of origin. Canadian healthcare reflects mainstream methodology. There is a general dismissal of traditional knowledge, medicine, decision-making, and healing practices, and we must advocate for cultural inclusion in healthcare, whether that be the inclusion of healing practices, advocating for services in hospitals and healthcare centers where language is preserved, where clients and patients are able to access their home communities as needed, to consult with elders if needed, and to be able to, kind of participate in a community, say if they need to go to another community for health care, but participate in a way that they're still able to maintain the considerations for their own cultures. So I know there are a lot of healthcare facilities now that have patient navigators for our Indigenous patients, and that's certainly a step in the right direction in that regard. Working in urban centers with Aboriginal clients. So, of course, there are many Aboriginal people who are living away from their community of origin or living off reserve, living in urban centers or larger communities, cities, and so on. And a lot of times, we're going to be working with these clients. Many of them are young people, teenagers, and young families that are kind of new to locations where they've left a smaller community to go to school or to access jobs or because maybe they've met somebody, a significant person that they're moving for and whatnot. So I have found in my work with Aboriginal clients in larger centers that, in our discussions with each other, we've talked about how many of them feel caught between two worlds, the urban and the original, like their home. So feeling disconnected from the land, family, traditional ways, and surrounded and absorbed by a Eurocentric culture. So the ties that they have had to their home and their culture tend to be severed quite easily, especially when you're just surrounded by Eurocentric culture. These individuals tend to face racism at all levels. They may not self-identify as Aboriginal. They may need help accessing resources, friendship centers, healthcare, government services, and social support. May need assistance in maintaining ties to community or culture of origin. And, of course, there's the importance of asking instead of guessing and rejecting assumptions. So it's important for us to assist clients in the urban centers with maintaining their connections to home and to their culture and those opportunities. So that brings us fairly quickly to the summary page. We've had no discussion in amongst these slides for obvious reasons because we are quite disconnected, not in the same room together, but that's okay. We'll have an opportunity to chat in just a brief moment. So we'll go through the summary. Aboriginal people still relive pain and trauma associated with the residential school and loss of culture through colonization. Social work and government workers were involved in early assimilation and eradication of Aboriginal cultures. Relationships of trust remain difficult to establish today in many communities. Elders and community leaders are the experts. We need to find and get to know someone in the community that we're comfortable consulting with. Not all Aboriginal cultures are the same. Some values and beliefs are similar across all cultures, and it's important for us to figure out which ones they are. Respectful participation in cultural activities without appropriation is important. Taking time to build relationships of trust and become informed about community norms and standards. And we will remain committed to being learners, allies, advocates, and open about who we are and our role in the community. Professional practice is an ongoing learning experience, and I think that is something that we can all definitely agree upon. So, last page. This is a photo of my daughter. Her name is Isla. She was born in the Northwest Territories, and this is a photo of her when she was just very little. So I thought I would include that. And now's the time that we can take a few moments for some questions or closing thoughts.
Yes, absolutely.
Are you out there, Nick?
Yes. Can you hear me, Angel? Yes. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Just want to say thank you, Angel, for this very informative and engaging presentation. And we have arrived at the question and answer section, so I'm going to do my best to get to all the questions and have and read them to Angel. However, please accept our apologies if we're not able to get to all your questions, but we will endeavor to either address them today or email you at a later time. So the first question that I want to ask Angel is, someone asked, what are some of the social work skills, including child protection assessment skills, that reinforce an anti-oppressive and decolonizing approach to heal and rebuild relationships and dynamics while acknowledging historical and intergenerational trauma?
That's a great question. I really think, and as we discussed in previous slides there, I think it's really important that when we perform authoritative type duties, so if we're involved in child protection in Aboriginal communities and so on, it's important to engage community elders and leaders in, the decision-making around protective services and including the community in coming up with solutions to some of the very difficult challenges that we might face in communities. Sometimes there's lack of resources, sometimes there's lack of safe placement, and so on. And it's really important to consult and involve the community in those decisions and in decision-making so that culture is preserved, so that we might be able to identify some of the roots of the issues that we're faced with and that the families are dealing with. If we are able to identify what some of the root issues are, then we're better able to help families ensure the safety of their children and help communities in protecting their children.
Okay, excellent. One of the participants online noted the use of the terms Aboriginal and Indigenous. Is there a term that's more appropriate to use, and why?
I think that the term that is used depends on, the client or the community that you're working with. It's important simply to ask. So for me, I tend to use the word Aboriginal, although if I were using the term Aboriginal over Indigenous, and I came to understand that a colleague or a client or a friend or a family member did not, was not okay with that term and really wanted to utilize another term, such as Indigenous, then I would be more than happy to change my language, And it all comes down to asking the questions, asking what's most appropriate here, Do you guys as a community use the term Aboriginal, or do you use the language Indigenous? And what's more appropriate here? Because it could be different from one place to the next. I think, there's been some focus on the word Aboriginal lately in recent times, because if you pick apart the term Aboriginal, it means the not original, or abnormal original type thing, right? So it really does derive from a sense that Indigenous people were not the original people, when we truly know that they were. Whereas Indigenous is quite clear in its terminology that it means the first and, the origin. So that's where things are at with that, but I think there are cultural groups that use the term interchangeably, and I tend to do that. But certainly if I were to go to work in another Aboriginal community today, one of the first questions I would ask would be, do you guys use the term Aboriginal, or are you using the term Indigenous, and what do you think is the most appropriate?
Yeah, excellent. Great response. Okay, our next question. What would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind when entering an Indigenous community for the first time as a settler social worker? You gave a lot of great tips, so what would you say is the most important thing?
Can you read it again?
What would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind when entering an Indigenous community for the first time as a settler social worker?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we go back through, through the slides and we talk about practicing respectfully as a learner, as an ally, that sort of thing, I would say that first and foremost, as a brand new social work settler, that you are a learner. And I'll just kind of go back to that one. I'm a learner. So it should be back up on the screen there. So this brings us right back to if you stepped off a plane or if you stepped out of your vehicle and you were going to go to work on reserve or in an Aboriginal community, and this is not your culture of origin, you would want to ask questions instead of guessing or assuming. We want to find and develop a trusting relationship with an elder or leader, and that we must respect and recognize that community elders and leaders, they expect to be consulted with, and then take the opportunity to get to know the community standards and norms. So as a learner, that approach first and foremost allows us to do that. And, participating and practicing as a learner also kind of puts off the impression that we're not there as the expert. We're there to participate as an equal player.
Okay, we still have a lot of time, still some more questions we can get to. Another participant asked, child protection roles can be prescriptive and processes are governed by legislation. How can this role be aligned with cultural norms?
Yeah, and you know what? I know that is very challenging, and I've been there, and I know that sometimes us as practitioners, sometimes we experience things that we have to make choices that ethically do not reflect the standards of the organization from which we represent. I think it's important as practitioners to be open and honest about what the expectation of the role is, why we're there, why we're performing certain duties, what the legislation that backs our positions is, and trying to really, if I would use a counseling approach, say, kind of meeting every scenario and every situation with a strengths-based type, solution-focused type approach, in that, yes, we're bound by laws in a lot of ways, and we're bound by authoritative duties in a lot of ways, but we can also work with families and individuals to find solutions. And they can be solutions that are a little bit outside the box sometimes, and a little bit outside the tick box sometimes, I like to say, but being able to, really consider different ways of dealing with things that can be more reflective of cultural norms and expectations. And like I said many times in the past hour, consult with a community leader, consult with a community elder, share with them the information that you have that reflects the expectation that's on you as a social worker, that you might be in an authoritative role that reflects government legislation, but sharing that with them, showing that to them, and being able to ask those questions. What can we do here? What can we do for this family? And what can we do for these children? What can we do for the community as a whole that meets these needs, meets the safety needs and so on, but also reflects community norms and standards?
Right.
So sometimes it really takes thinking outside the box and being a little bit creative.
Excellent. There's still questions coming in, so we'll keep going through them as they're coming in. You talked about being a learner and being open in the community and letting people know who you are in the community. One of our participants today asked, can you talk a little bit about how to navigate dual relationships in some of these small communities?
Navigate relationships in some small communities?
The dual relationship, so the professional and the personal, the community, being part of the community, but being the professional in the community as well?
Yeah. Yes, and like I was saying, sometimes these are some of the interview questions for some of those small communities where you are quite visible. So if you're a community professional, but you're also a community participant, right? Sometimes it's hard to separate the two, right? So, but you know what? Over the years, I have found through my experience that community members are generally pretty good at, seeing you for who you are as a person and also seeing you for who you are as a professional. Mm-hmm. And I think that also comes with time. So I would say that the first little while in a community, you're seen as just, Angel the social worker. But as time goes on and you develop relationships and you develop friendships and you develop connections and trust, as that trust is built, you're also seen as Angel the person and Angel the mom and Angel the volunteer at the school type of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that really comes with time and with being able to have true and honest conversations. So if you are standing up in the grocery store picking out your apples and you're approached by a client and they want to discuss their file with you right there in the produce aisle, you might be able to say, you know what, Mr. So-and-so, your situation is really important to me, and I have you booked in for an appointment with me on Monday, and I'm looking forward to that meeting, and we'll be able to talk in person and in private to preserve your privacy at that time. So I really can't talk right now because I'm getting my apples and I got to get home because I'm making an apple pie or whatever it might be or whatever it is you're doing that day. But it's acknowledging that person. They've opened up the conversation to you, so they're not too concerned about, privacy at that moment. It's okay to say, I see you. I recognize you, and I appreciate that you have something going on, and I will get to it, and we will get to it, and we'll deal with it in a private setting. And it's okay to have those conversations. And I think as time goes on, and the more you have those type of experiences, and the more you have those type of situations that come up for you, and you kind of set the standard for who you are personally and professionally, and then there's the expectation. And then people become quite comfortable with that.
Excellent. We've got time maybe for a couple more questions. I'm keeping an eye on the time as well. Another participant asked, can you speak a little bit about the resiliency in Aboriginal communities and what you're seeing as some of the strengths within Aboriginal communities?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So the preservation of culture is something that I have seen in all the communities that I've been in, and in the Mi'kmaq community as well here in Newfoundland, that something that is just so powerful is to be able to experience that communities are committed to healing, communities are committed to preserving and educating their children in cultural norms and traditions, so haunting, language, all those sort of things that make up the culture and tradition of each individual community that varies differently, like we said, right across the board. So just stepping into a community and being able to feel the atmosphere and just there's a different feeling altogether of living and working in an Aboriginal community, because there is so much there. There's so much there in terms of culture that needs to be uncovered and needs to be seen and appreciated and experienced. Many times, I've worked with a lot of colleagues from other health professions where there will be community events, so like dances, feasts, funerals, weddings, different things that have a lot of different cultural differences in them and such beautiful, strong, and powerful experiences. But I've worked with many colleagues who just don't seem to think that it should be their role, or they don't really participate in any of these events. So they don't really truly get the opportunity to see the strengths and the resiliency of many of the communities and the preservation of the culture and the languages and so on, because they think that maybe they're just there to work and leave, when in reality that is not overly helpful for communities. If you go into an Aboriginal community today and you participate as an ally, as we discussed, you will find that very quickly you will be given respect and appreciation and invitation to continue to develop trust and an invitation to continue to develop relationships. But I tell you, I have learned so much from the families and the communities and the clients that I have worked with in sitting in people's homes and sitting around kitchen tables and in living rooms and talking to families about the things that they have been through, but also the things that they share as family members and community members. and the strength and resiliency that they have, and how they're continuing on to teach their children traditional ways that are beyond some of the traumatic experiences that many of them have faced over the years. That's a long one.
Yes, that was excellent. Self-reflection is so important in our work that we do as social workers. When it comes to Aboriginal social work practice, what are some of the things we need to be thinking about in terms of in terms of our reflection and self-reflection?
For sure. I think, and on top of that too, I think I was kind of thinking the question was going to go a little bit towards self-care, which kind of ties into all of that. When we do self-reflection, we also need to look at how are we taking care of ourselves and our colleagues as well. But in terms of self-reflection and being aware, so it's important to know our own culture of origin. So we may have mixed ancestry. We may have certain cultural groups that we as practitioners come from. So we bring our own worldview to our practice and to our relationships with other people. And so I think it's really important to, be aware of who we are as individuals and as professionals and what our morals and values and ethical standpoints are, because they're going to guide who we are as professionals as well. And if there are things in our minds that we struggle with, like if we're experiencing something while working in the Aboriginal community that we find particularly challenging and we can't seem to understand or we can't seem to agree with or allow to happen type of thing. And I'm thinking of kids running around at 3 a.m. in a northern community where the sun is shining all night long, and our own moral beliefs might be, hey, that's way too late for a 3-year-old to be playing and they might be at risk and all that kind of thing. Well, that's good self-awareness. That's good self-reflection. But I think we need to take those beliefs and those morals and talk to people about them. Talk to the community members about them. Talk to the families. Talk to the elders and leaders, and try to get a better understanding of where we are at in our own morals and in our own minds, and how our cultural influences have impacted us in the way that we think and the way that we live, and knowing who we are as people and as professionals, so that we can be respectful and still participate kind of respectfully in a community.
Excellent, thank you. Another question that we have is more around some of the practicalities. But someone was wondering how to determine if a gift should be offered when working with an elder or elders, for example, tobacco.
Mm-hmm. So how do we determine if there's a situation where we should give a gift?
Yes.
Okay. I have, I'm going to give you a little practice example. So one time in the first territorial community that I worked in, I met with a spiritual leader, and I spoke with her a little bit about my child. And when we were done speaking, and she had such great advice for me, when we were done speaking, I said to her, is it customary for me to give you a gift for your knowledge? And if so, what do you usually accept? What are the usual gifts? And she said, yeah, actually, she said, typically people will give me a pouch of tobacco or a food item or whatever. And she said, that's up to you. But you know what? I said, okay, I'll be back in a little while. And I went out and I bought a little pouch of tobacco, and I came back and I handed it to her, and I said, this is a gift for you for the knowledge that you just gave me about my child, and I really appreciate your friendship, and so on. So really, I just asked her. I mean, I didn't know the answer, so I didn't know what would be customary or respectful for me to give this lady. So I just outright asked her, and she seemed to appreciate it. She appreciated that I just outright asked her, what is it that is normally done to thank you for your knowledge? Mm-hmm. And she had an opportunity to teach me. She had the opportunity to teach me that, yes, in my community and in my culture, when I share knowledge, people tend to give me a pouch of tobacco.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Well, I hope that answers.
Yeah, I think it does, absolutely. Next question is in terms of the history, that social work that you alluded to in the presentation, the history of social work in communities and with the residential schools, do you feel that history has hindered the community's acceptance of social workers who come in from other cultures?
Can you read that one more time because you cut out right in the middle?
Oh, sorry. Has the history of social workers in the communities and residential schools hindered the community's acceptance of social workers who come in from other cultures?
Has it hindered?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I would say that yes, in a lot of ways. Yeah. And sometimes even now, you might be the sixth community social worker that works in a community in the past 10 years. And you don't know what 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 have done before you, and you don't know if they have done good, ethical, culturally appropriate work, or if they have done harm, even now, in this day and age. You don't know. So when you arrive in a community as a new, and somebody termed it settler social worker, and I really like that term because it's true, right? As a visiting or a brand new social worker in an Aboriginal community, you may be following in some really great shoes, and you may be following in some not so great shoes. So, and I think you'll figure out pretty quickly which shoes they were, right? So it's important that's why it's important, like, remember the slide we talked about openness, keeping openness in the toolkit? So from the moment you arrive in an Aboriginal community, that's your opportunity to show them who you are, why you're there, what you're going to be doing, how long you figure you're going to stay, what your roles are, and word gets around pretty quickly if you are actually listening to people, if you are asking questions about cultural, like the appropriateness of including culture into your practice and how might people want to do that with you, if you're showing respect and you're asking questions as a learner, as an ally, if you're doing all of these things, word gets around quickly that, this social worker, it may be able to help us, is not here to take our children away, or is not here to, set up these services that are for us, not by us, So, it's all in the approach. It's all in the approach. We cannot take on, as individual professionals, we cannot take on what has happened in the past, because I always say, if I had been in the past, I would not have done it like that. So we can't, as practitioners, we can't take that on. But what we can take on is how we practice from the moment we're boots on the ground and going forward.
Excellent. So there was there's some more questions there as well. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. And we do have to wrap up in a couple minutes. So other people did share some comments around how great the session was today, Angel, and fantastic presentation. And we'll have a look at the questions that are still left outstanding, and we will try to provide a response to those questions. So we do thank you for the questions, and thank you for participating in the event today. Angel, before I wrap up, did you have any concluding remarks that you wanted to make?
No, I just, I really enjoyed myself despite just speaking at my computer and speaking at my telephone, which is unfortunate. I wish we were able to all sit together in one big room and have a lengthy, challenging, hard discussion. I wish we could have the opportunity to do that, but I guess this is the next best thing. And I appreciate every single one of you that has participated with me here today. I'm a learner too, so I want to know if there's anything that's missing here. If you have suggestions for this, I would really love to receive those, and you can contact the NLASW with some feedback if you like. Thank you so much.
And Angel, I want to thank you again for this stellar presentation and for sharing your knowledge and experience with us here today. As social workers, of course, our journey to cultural competence is ongoing, and having access to sessions like these helps us to reflect and become better informed of the cultural considerations we need to be mindful of in our practices that will ultimately enhance our work with Aboriginal people and our social work relationships. So thank you so much again for this presentation. And as I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Social Workers produced standards for cultural competence in social work practice in 2016. They are available on this webinar site and also on the website of the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Social Workers. And things that Angel has talked about today makes those standards come alive. So I encourage all of our members here in Newfoundland and Labrador to review those standards, but our colleagues from across the country as a point of reference and a point of interest that you might be interested in reading those standards as well. Just a few wrap-up comments that, again, the recording of this presentation, the slides, and the resources will be uploaded to the CASW website and the NLASW website for your reference. For those who've attended at least 75 minutes or more of this presentation, confirmation of attendance is available now by clicking the yellow icon at the bottom right of your window, and that will allow you to print your certificate of attendance. And on that note, I want to say thank you all for participating. This is our first national webinar that we've done from here in Newfoundland and Labrador, so it's very exciting, and very exciting that Angel was able to do this for us today, and I'm fortunate that I get to continue to work with Angel on our promotion of the profession committee as well. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and take care.
Take care, everyone.